education is about inspiration, right? Not memorization. Memorization is part of it, but really to inspire students, professors need these insights and they need high quality, engaging content.
Hey, everybody. Thank you for joining us and welcome to the Founders in LA podcast. I'm your host, Ethan Cole, and this is an opportunity to shine the spotlight through a product lens on some of the exceptional founders we have as part of the LA community in an unedited, one-take organic conversation. With us today is Stephen Walters. Thanks so much for joining us, Stephen.
Yeah, Ethan, thanks for having me.
I'm excited to chat with you. But first, a word from our sponsors. Founders in LA is brought to you by Nearshore. Nearshore is a trailblazer in nearshore outsourcing and staff augmentation. With over 15 years of experience offering exceptional Latin American software development, data, product, and design talent for U.S. projects, Nearshore has revolutionized the way companies scale their teams. They stand apart with 50% female leadership and are trusted by companies large and small, and have been helping U.S. customers grow since before nearshoring was cool. Discover how Nearshore can power your tech goals and help you stay lean while scaling fast. Learn more at www.nearshore.com. That's www.nearsure.com. We're also brought to you by Unita. Unita Club is the co-working space that sets itself apart. With locations in El Segundo, Manhattan Beach, and Hermosa, Unita is where creativity flourishes. Unlike traditional offices, they provide an inspiring environment where ideas can thrive and businesses can grow. With Unita, there's no hidden fees, flexible terms, options for dedicated offices, and unlimited access to conference rooms, a photo studio, this podcast studio, plus standard 3D printers and 24/7 access in any of their locations. They're local champions who support neighborhood businesses, open their event spaces to nonprofits, and celebrate art, music, and culture. Join Unita Club and experience co-working like never before. Learn more at www.unita.club. That's www.unita.club, C-L-U-B. Our guest today is Stephen Walters. He's the co-founder and chief content officer at Breakout Learning. Stephen, could you just give us a 30-second description of Breakout?
Absolutely. So Breakout Learning is the world's first ever AI-enabled educational publisher. So what we do is we create engaging content that tees up small group discussions that happen on our AI-powered platform. If you look at what's happened in the world of education over the past 100+ years, we've had very few innovations. Where we started was, a group of students sitting around a table, the Harkness method, it was called. Very little professor intervention. These students engaged in a conversation that was meant to reach for critical thinking, right? But we've moved away from that. The inventions that we've seen, the textbook, the Scantron, standardized learning, these innovations have moved us away from critical thinking and towards rote memorization of facts. And so we think that leads to a lot of the polarization that we see in society. We think that leads to a lot of the systemic problems we see, certainly in our education system. And Breakout's here to scale the Harkness method, to bring small group discussions back.
That's great. And, it's been about 1,000,000 years since I was in college. But when I was doing that, for me, one of the important aspects was, professor to student ratio at that time. Or for me, I just knew it even at that moment that it was important for me to be in a smaller group when doing the learning for the interaction. It's, for everything that I've learned on YouTube, it's not my best medium for learning. And it really was coming together with other folks and learning. How did you find Breakout as your point for success? How did you determine this was the place to start, going?
Well,
Did you start somewhere else?
Ethan, a lot of people feel the way, I'll answer your question in just a minute, but a lot of people feel the way that you feel about learning and being in a small group is the studies and the data show it's one of the most effective forms of learning. The problem is it doesn't scale, right? I mean, if you're in a class of 50 or 100, you're not going to get a lot of airtime. And so there's no format for you to test out your ideas or your thoughts or to really engage in the process. And so a lot of people choose silence. If you talk to professors around the country, that's what they'll tell you. They'll tell you that their students don't want to talk, right? They don't want to engage. They find the old method of learning, reading a static PDF or textbook, writing up a paper on it, coming to class to hear a lecture. They find it pretty uninspiring. And as a measure of critical thinking, with the advent of ChatGPT, really reading an assignment and writing a paper about it is sort of a meaningless exercise. So breakout answers for that as well. We put small group discussions at the center of our learning, and we use our AI-powered platform to moderate and assess those discussions. And we use engaging dynamic storytelling and content to tee up those discussions.
That's great. Oh, sorry, go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh no, just to answer your question, I mean, what brought me to Breakout Learning, my background is as a storyteller, right, and a creative entrepreneur. I started a theater company in Texas in my early 20s. I lived in LA off and on for many years. I had a career as a TV actor and a TV writer, and entertainment was really where I cut my teeth as in my professional career. And so for me, it was teaming up with my co-founder and the CEO of the company, Ramit Varma, who has 25 years in the EdTech space, that really brought Breakout Learning to fruition. It was sort of my storytelling, my love of storytelling and my desire to use stories to teach curriculum really resonated with Ramit. His desire to sort of innovate and revolutionize the way we teach and learn. Those two things brought us together. And then, of course, when we found our third co-founder, our technical co-founder, Josh Oster-Morris, who has a deep background in AI and machine learning, that's when I think the sort of like three pillars of the business really came together, and what we were aspiring to do really crystallized.
Has AI played a part in the storytelling that you guys are doing in terms of the learning exercises you're doing? Where does the AI fit into the?
Yeah, so the AI is really not on the content side of it as much as it is on the assessment side, right? So we use AI in our proprietary software to moderate and assess these discussions that happen on our platform. So it's really kind of a new format for learning. It's like we're basically saying, hey, we're replacing the written assignment in the research paper. And instead of doing a written assignment in a research paper, why not meet up in small groups, watch dynamic, engaging content that's often, but not always, driven by quality storytelling. That hooks the student's interest. Then you've got them, right? Now you just have to drive the story to a critical decision point, and then you ask the students to evaluate and analyze what they would do if they were in that situation. And that's where our software really does its magic, is that the AI is able to give the professor insights on the aggregate, group, and individual level into what's happening in those discussions that are happening outside of the classroom, right? So we're kind of replacing homework. We are replacing this older format of learning that hasn't evolved with time and technology, right? And the truth is we often say, we're not the disruptors, right? Technology is the disruptor, but what we're trying to do actually is to arm teachers and professors with the tools that they need to sort of fight back against this wave of AI that's kind of breaking the old systems and rendering a lot of it obsolete.
Yeah, no, and that was I know that was a big question in early 2023, as soon as ChatGPT became popularized and people recognized, hey, it's able to write me a 2,000-word essay on, fill in the blank subject. What does that look like for colleges? So was it more of a kind of a response to that world, or like how did you guys find yourselves evolving last year? Because it seems like that was a kind of a
Yeah, we predated the sort of what I'll call the kind of wave, the ChatGPT OpenAI wave. We had always had moderated small group discussions at the core of our business. It's just that, in late 2022, the scope of what we could do it just went 10x immediately overnight. I remember us talking in the early days about how great it would be if we could measure talk time. Like if we could tell professors that there were certain students that were talking too much. Well, now that almost seems trite compared to what we can do now, the level of sophistication in the technology. But it's important to note that a lot of Silicon Valley ed tech companies are in the business of disintermediation, right? They're trying to replace the professor, but that's not what we're about. We reject that. We think that in the face of this technology, we don't want to replace professors. Like I said, we want to arm professors with the technology so that they can have better insights into their students' learning, so they can have more data and information about their students' learning and about where they are in that learning journey. The Atlantic put this article out that it said something to the effect of like, there's an arms race on college campuses and professors are losing. And that's in reference to artificial intelligence and to AI and ChatGPT in particular. Our philosophy is we want to give professors the tools to fight back.
What's you touched on something pretty that I'd love to learn more and double click into. It seems interesting. You mentioned talk time as an original metric that we're looking. Like, what are some of the metrics that you guys are utilizing or that professors are asking for using your?
Yeah, soft skills are a big part of it, but it's also how the student comports themselves in a group context, how they conduct themselves, but also I think the main thing is the learning objectives, right? Like, so our beachhead for our business, we think of ourselves as being a large scale AI enabled educational publisher. That's where we're headed. But where we are today, our beachhead was in business school, right? So we actually our first customer was UCLA Anderson. So we piloted our early content and curriculum pieces at Anderson, and then we sort of grew into their ecosystem a little bit. Now we have, I think over a dozen Anderson professors using us at the undergraduate and graduate levels. But if you look at business school studies, they're always they fall under a certain discipline. It could be a case study about entrepreneurship, right? And then underneath that discipline, there's all these foundational business concepts that these cases are meant to sort of ask the students to explore. Things like, I'm sure you talk about this a lot in the podcast, talking to founders, product market fit, user testing, customer interviews, all these sort of foundational aspects of what it means to be an entrepreneur. Our software can actually measure not just are the students talking about it, but we assign a critical thinking score to their discussion. Like how high up the pyramid of critical thinking did they go? Like did they just remember things from the pre-work that they did, or are they actually evaluating and creating and synthesizing information? And that's really valuable to a professor because if you just look at a snapshot of the information, let's say you got 100 kids in your class and they all go off to do this breakout experience. Before they come to hear the lecture, you're going to know, hey, look, only 20% of my students even brought up product market fit. And of the few who did, they all had a low level of understanding of how it related to this particular case. So what that does is that lets that professor know, okay, that's an area that I need to really focus in on and spend in-class airtime on, because it's a place where my students are weak. Conversely, if you notice that there's a theme where a lot of your students are doing great, you can cold call. We can surface to you, hey, this particular student had a really insightful comment about user testing, and you can call them out. You can say, hey, Gabriella, I noticed that you had this really insightful comment. Why don't you share it with the group? So it really does it makes the professor something of a mind reader. And that's what we're all about. Our philosophy, our sort of tagline, if you will, is education is about inspiration, right? Not memorization. Memorization is part of it, but really to inspire students, professors need these insights and they need high quality, engaging content. This is the TikTok generation, right? I mean, reading is important and that should always be a fundamental central part of education. But if you really want to engage a student, the best way to do it is to use storytelling and dynamic content, because when a student's hooked in to a story or to a piece of content that's engaging, suddenly their third eye is wide open. And suddenly it becomes much easier to connect concepts to the idea of human want and need as they see it expressed in a story or a circumstance or in a piece of content. So these are the things that, I mean, as you can tell, gets me really excited to talk about. But these are also the things that we're hearing from our customers that really works about our product.
Yeah, it's really fascinating. There's 2 points I'd love to just tap into. First is looking back to, in a former life, I was a professor. I've visiting lecturer at UC Santa Cruz, at UCLA, and thinking back to how I graded, and I definitely did most of the grade was via, essays. So that's kind of out the window now. And part of it was, there was some class participation, but that was kind of a much fuzzier thing. So it's really interesting to hear how you are approaching class participation more as kind of a fuzzy 15% of your grade, but it's ridiculously subjective, to actually putting a rubric around, hey, critical thinking, we can measure critical thinking skills. But the other really fascinating piece that I think you guys are tapping into, which is be interesting, is I just have a sense, and there's no backing, this is all anecdotal, but it feels like the generation that's in college right now they're of a generation where there's like, I don't call it shyness, but hesitancy to speak out loud or speak in public. And yet it's the same generation that really enjoys likes and shares in social media. And it's almost, I almost can think of a scenario where the professor is talking about something in class and their ability not to call out the student and say, hey, when you share what you did, but if they could pull up a quote from a discussion and play that back, uh, it almost, no science behind this at all, but it almost feels like there could be something to that where the students like, oh, I got quoted, or oh, look at me up there. It's like a
Yeah.
in-person class version of a like where you get
Yeah. Yeah.
quoted, and it's less pressure than, hey, hey, Steven, what did you think about this? Would be all of a sudden like, oh no, I'm called on. It almost like reverses the trend of of pride in it. We're like, oh, they like what I said, but I didn't have to be put on the spot. And I don't know if it's better or worse, but I can see how there's something to that, and I could see how professors would try it, and I could absolutely see how students would latch onto that.
Yeah, I think you make some really, really excellent points. I mean, what we've observed is, you know what, I'll use something a professor said as an example. Robert Siemens, a professor at NYU Stern, we built a case, a game theory case, a strategy case around the sort of patent dispute between Apple and Samsung, and Robert piloted it in his class. And his biggest piece of feedback, I mean, he loved the experience, and was had a lot of really, really great things to say. But he said to him, the biggest value proposition was that the shy students were ready to speak up when they came to class. And I think it's because, similar to what you just said, I think when you have a platform to hear other people's thoughts and opinions, share your own, almost test out what it is that you're thinking, and you receive positive and negative feedback, it causes you to sort of further formulate your thoughts and go higher up that critical thinking pyramid. And so I think if you engage in that process of conversation, then you're more willing to speak up in the classroom, because if you were going to fall on your face, you've already done it in sort of a private forum, right? If you had something really insightful and smart to say, you've already seen the likes, we'll call them, the signals from your peers in that intimate setting to let you know to keep going. And so when that subject comes up during the in-class lecture, you're going to raise your hand, right? So I think there's a lot of incentives for the students to want to participate. But the one that you brought up is really interesting. The idea that if I say something that's really insightful, if I say something that really reaches up into the creative level of critical thinking, my professor might just call it out in class as almost like a super like, I think that's cool too. And we hope as our software continues to develop, we want to be more, we want to go deeper down this sort of rabbit hole of giving students critical feedback about how they comport themselves. We're just sort of scratching the surface of what's possible there. So these soft skills are going to be really critical as well.
Yeah, I could see a not too distant world where you could create like a highlights of a discussion forum. There's tools out here to do it for podcasts already, so it wouldn't be a far stretch for you guys to like take those discussions and find like the best clips.
We are already doing that. Our software does that today. Yeah, I mean, we're really far down the road. I mean, we're definitely out of, far out of MVP mode, and we're into sort of like, scale mode, which is great. But the part of the process where we were really crystallizing our product was also really fun and exciting. And it was a lot of trial and error. There were a lot of mistakes. We tripped and fell many, many times. It's our story is not too different from any other entrepreneurial story that you'll hear about, right? We kind of followed the playbook as far as beta testing into user testing, driving towards an MVP, using customer discovery interviews to sort of crystallize our value proposition, and to sort of line up what we thought was product market fit before we scaled. I mean, we kind of did it by the book, and that's not surprising. My background as a storyteller, I have a degree in theater and a minor in communications. But Ramit has I believe a undergrad. I believe he studied engineering, but he has a master's degree in business. Our head of sales has a master's in business. Our head of marketing has a master's in business. So I'm really the only non-business guy in the C-suite, but that's also what makes Breakout so cool, is that we're this, we're this sort of, we call ourselves, the Pixar of education, right? We're bringing together high quality content, high quality storytelling, foundational instructional design, and technology to create our version of cinematic magic, right? Which is AI enabled curriculum.
Do you how as you were building, as you're going by the book, do you recall at one moment you decided, hey, it's time to start selling, and how did you find those first customers?
The first customers, we reached out into our personal networks. Like I mentioned earlier, we did a beta with a professor at Anderson, UCLA, named Dan Nathanson. Dan piloted a beta of our learning format, and he did it before we even had the software built. I mean, we built a mock-up of it in Google Slides, right? And so we went into the classroom, and it was a little embarrassing. I mean, I felt like I needed to apologize for the quality of the content. And we got kicked in the teeth by these students, and by Dan and by a couple of the TAs. But that's how you learn, right? Like you get kicked in the teeth, but you also hear in the Venn diagram of everybody's thoughts, opinions, and their feedback, you start to see a path forward, right? You start to see a path ahead. And if you listen, it's there for you. So that's what we did. That led us to build a sort of beta, which we then put into our software. We kind of took the feedback that we were hearing from the users. I want to say it was a couple hundred students that interacted with our sort of our pre-beta. With our beta, it was probably about twice that. We started to build towards our MVP. It took us about 9 months to go from the sort of pre-beta to the MVP. And in the process of doing that, we interviewed, I mean, it must be hundreds of college business school professors, both to tell them about the business that we were building, but also to find out what they liked about it or didn't like about our product. And we did demos with all of them along the way. So, I mean, we sort of through trial and error, through data, right? We followed the data, we followed the recurring themes and the feedback that we were hearing, and we crystallized the product. And there's always this balance, right, between being responsive to what you're hearing, but also trusting your instincts. Sometimes when you're in like a big wide open blue ocean, and in many ways we are, we don't necessarily have any direct competitors. Now there are companies we are competing with, right, like Harvard Business Review for case studies, the Case Study Center for case studies, big publishers, the old school publishers, McGraw-Hill, H&H, all those companies. They are certainly competitors of ours, but we're nothing to them today, right? Like we're not even a blip on their radar today. But we're leading in a new direction. We're going somewhere they're not going necessarily, not in the exact same way. And so, you're always balancing, okay, the feedback you're hearing, some of it is going to be from people who are not going to be early adopters. Some of it's going to be from people who are never going to use your product. And so sussing out like who's your customer, who's the person that's going to want this, it's difficult, and for me, my background as a creative entrepreneur was in the arts sector, the not-for-profit sector in particular, right? So it's like that's a very different experience to build a not-for-profit, right? That's about what's my mission? How can my mission function in the community that I exist in? And how can I build a base of, support on the donation and foundation side to sustain that mission? It's very different when you're talking about trying to get somebody to give you money for a product that they're going to buy. It's very, very different for me, very new, but also very exciting.
How did you get that first paying customer? So it sounds like you get the beta into UCLA through a personal network, and then you're able to probably leverage that into other professors at UCLA, and then they have friends other places. But the first transaction, did that?
Yeah, it was convincing our first customer number one. It was convincing him that we were for real. He had to see the software work. He had to see it with the sort of AI backend functioning properly. He had to see that the content was high quality, that it was pedagogically sound. Like we had to put our money where our mouth is, so to speak. And so, it took doing to really get from that really terrible, borderline embarrassing pre-beta that we did to that MVP. It was a lot of work. It was a lot of blood, sweat, and tears and long hours to get there. And of course, we're still in that mode, right? Because now we're in scale mode, which is, in many respects, an even bigger challenge.
Yeah. So what's next? What's next up? The challenge you're facing is scale. What comes with that?
I mean, I mean, I think the challenges are familiar. We're trying to build up our content library. That's our big thing. We're a publisher. So, right now we have about, 50 cases in development, covering all the major discipline areas in business school. I think by May 1st, we'll have around 100. I'm sorry, March 1st, we'll have around 100. I think by May, we'll have around 200. And so we'll grow our case library to a pretty significant size. Side by side with that, we're developing some new initiatives. Like we're not just doing case studies now, we're expanding into simulations, which requires, some software development, things of that nature. And we're looking down the road at, what's on the roadmap for us as far as feature development and versioning and all those things. But, at the core of our business, high quality content, solid instructional design and technology, so I think the biggest challenge that we face is cultural, to be honest with you. I think we're seeing a strong demand for the type of engaging content that we're making and for our platform. I think culturally, it's a challenge because my team, as an example, the content team is a very different breed of cat, right? It's the content folks speak a different language. I mean, I'm not embarrassed to admit this, that for a while when I would talk to folks on the software team and they talked about the product, I thought they were talking about the thing that we would sell. So, I mean, I don't have a background in SaaS. I don't have a background as a developer or software engineer or any of those things. Neither do the people on my team. And so we speak different languages, right? The folks on the software side, the folks on the content side, and even to an extent, the sales and marketing guys. It's an interesting confluence of people with very diverse backgrounds that speak very different languages. It's very unusual for people on my team to interface with sales guys, but that's the challenge, to bring it all together, to align it all behind our vision. But that's also what makes it worth doing. That's why it's so much fun, because it's so cool to be in a room with these brilliant software engineers. I mean, our CTO and our co-founder, Josh Oster Morris, I mean, he's an impressive gentleman. Ramit Varma is very impressive. These guys intimidate me. So that makes me want to level up, right? Same thing with our head of sales. I admire him so much. That makes me want to level up. And I think those feelings are mutual. We recognize each other's talent and have respect for the things that we do. I think that makes it fun. It makes it worth doing, and that's the thing I'm the most excited about every day, is like figuring out what is our culture going to be. Like when we align all these things, who will we be? It's a question, but it's a really exciting one to try to answer.
Oh, it's great. Yeah, with any growing company where you have to scale fast, trying to maintain the culture that you had when you were smaller, when you're bigger, is it's a classic challenge. There's 1,001 answers to it, but it always comes from the interest and the willingness and the perseverance of the leadership team to stick to it and find ways to keep it feeling small while
Yeah.
getting big. That's awesome.
It's been fun. I mean, it's been a crazy ride so far, and I think it's we're just getting started.
Uh, Thank you so much for joining. We like to ground things in LA, and having someone who spent time in the industry. I imagine it shouldn't be too hard. But what's the most LA moment you've had? It could be tech related. It doesn't have to be.
So, okay. I mean, I feel like a little bit like I'm cheating because I technically live in Texas now. Our production studio is in Texas. But here's the thing, like Breakout Learning is an LA, Texas company. We were born in LA. We have offices in LA and in Texas. So it really is like these are my two homes, Texas and Los Angeles. And it's the two homes of Breakout Learning. I spend a ton of time there. And our CEO and my co-founder, Ramit Varma, he lives in LA. My most LA story is from my previous career as an actor. I was on a TV series called Friday Night Lights, and I played the guidance counselor at the high school, a character named Glenn Reed. My character is really infamous because he gets drunk at a karaoke bar and he kisses Coach Taylor's wife, right? It's this infamous moment. It's the worst kiss in TV history. I can't even watch because it's so embarrassing for me. But like my character, I was in like seasons, 2 and 4, it's like a recurring guest star role, right? So like fans of the show, diehard fans of the show know who I am. I'm not a famous actor, God, by any stretch of the imagination, but the diehard Friday Night Lights fans know who I am. They also know my best friend and roommate at the time of the story that I'm about to tell you. His name is Derek Phillips, and he plays a much bigger character than I play on the show called named Billy Riggins. And Derek and I are in a car driving from our place, which was on Sierra Bonita in that sort of area by the Grove. we're driving to go to a restaurant to meet two other cast members, the Collette sisters. Annie Palicki is the actress's name who plays the one Collette sister, and then Stacey Oristano is the actress who plays the other. And they are good friends of me and Derek. You're at my wedding, and I mean, there's good friends, and we are going to meet them at a restaurant, and we pull up to a stoplight, and I'm in the passenger seat and Derek's in the driver's seat, and I hear this like horn honk. And I look over, and it's it's like two young girls in the car, or two young women in the car. I roll the window down, they roll the window down, and they ask me, are you Glenn Reed from Friday Night Lights? You got to understand, like only FNL fans know me. Nobody ever comes up to me on the street to recognize me. And if they do, I know it's for Friday Night Lights. But I got excited because I realized I could make these girls' night. And I said, yeah, I sure am. And they said, oh my God. And they started like screaming. They got so excited. And I said, well, if you're excited to meet me, you're about to be even more excited. And then I was like, I was in the car and I like leaned the chair back like that, and they saw Derek in front of the, with his hand on the wheel, and he waved at him. And I mean, they shrieked. They were so excited. And Derek was like, yeah, we're on our way to meet the Collette sisters. The Collette sisters. We're on our way to meet Mindy and Tyra. And they just, I mean, we made whoever those young women were, we made their night. And that was like my most favorite LA moment, like in a non-cynical way.
Yeah.
It was like that was really cool, that we got to see that happen. So that's probably an unusual LA moment story for this podcast, but it's my story. So if you ever see me walking down the street and somebody is taking a picture with me, they are definitely a Friday Night Lights fan. And actually they probably hate me because I'm one of the most unlikable characters on the show because I kissed the coach's wife drunk at a karaoke bar. So that's my LA moment.
Stephen, that is fantastic, and yeah, it is the first on this podcast to be the person in the story. I love it. I also appreciate the big reveal, or like, oh, you think it's great right now. You lean the seat back.
They were even more excited to see Derek than they were to see me. I tell people I'm a recovered actor, right? So now I can apply all my energies and creative focus to making Breakout Learning a success. But that part of my life was fun too.
Oh, I can imagine if they thought you were messing with them too, like, oh yeah, we go visit the Collette sisters, and you're like,
well, of course, we did not say, do you want to come with us, because we didn't know who they were, but that would have probably made their night even more special. I mean, Annie Palicki is, she is a true celebrity, and I think that they would have been even more excited to meet her, very likely, than they were to meet me and Derek. So it's kind of a cute story. It's kind of fun.
That's fantastic. And thank you so much for sharing. And thank you so much for sharing more about Breakout Learning, Stephen. This is great.
Yeah, go to breakoutlearning.com. Check us out. Our case library is getting bigger by the day. So if you're a professor and you're listening, hit us up.
Awesome. Well, thanks again. Our guest today has been co-founder and chief content officer at Breakout Learning, Stephen Walters. Thanks so much again, Stephen.
Ethan, it was a pleasure.
This is great. I'd like to thank again our sponsors, Nearshore and Unita. I'd like to thank you all for listening to us. And if you like what you hear, please smash that subscribe button. Thanks again for joining us, and we'll catch you next time on Founders in LA.